Who would you be without that negative thought about yourself? Our guest is going to show you how to escape negative mental chatter, shift stress, and calm anxiety simply with pen and paper. You'll learn how to shatter the limitations holding you back while building a supportive and compassionate founder mindset. This is going to be a delicious conversation. Stay tuned for the Start of Life live show. Let's glow, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Start of Life live show. I'm your host, Ande, Lyons, 4 times founder and startup champion to founders around the world. And after raising 4 businesses of my own, I know firsthand the challenges that you are facing and walking through every single day, the high levels of uncertainty that you face every single day. I want to say a big yoo-hoo to all the live viewers tuning in and a hearty welcome to all the replay viewers and podcast listeners. I'm so grateful you carved out time to tune in and grab the gems from our delicious conversation today, because you know, as you do better, your business is going to do better. If you're tuning in live from or later from YouTube, please click on that subscribe button. It helps us reach more founders and help more founders on their journey. So thank you so much for that. To receive an alert whenever I post a new show, come on over and join the Startup Life Live meetup group. That way you'll get an alert every time a new show is posted, and there may be a founder that will have just the information that you're going to need, or maybe you need to just take a break and hear someone else's stories instead of your own. If you find yourself resonating with the show's mission and vision of amplifying diverse founder voices while serving first-time founders around the world, please reach out to me to learn more about how you can make a greater impact on the startup ecosystem through sponsoring the Startup Life live show. So I'm so excited to introduce you to our wonderful guest today. Let me just pull up some artwork here while I read and tell you all about her. It's the oh so phenomenal coach, author, and speaker, Chana Mason. Chana understands how fear can hold us back from success. A gang of armed men broke into Chana's childhood home in Bogota, Colombia, and held her family hostage. Her family miraculously fled to Miami, but 5-year-old Chana's sense of safety was decimated. And 2 decades later, she still dealt with PTSD, anxiety, and depression. So to heal herself, Chana dove into a journey to rediscover her peace and joy. She's learned from the world's top experts on the human mind and now helps folks shatter the limitations holding them back while building a supportive, compassionate mindset. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to welcome to the show. Hey, Chana Mason! Welcome to the Startup Life Live show.
I'm still giddy from the Latin American music you were playing. I was like dancing salsa in the background over here. It was great.
Thank you. Where are you hailing from today?
So I am here in my apartment, smack in the center of Jerusalem in the funky neighborhood of Nachlaot. It's this like really cool, eclectic, artsy kind of place. We love it here.
Oh, that's wonderful. Folks tuning in, if you got a second, let us know where you're hanging out from. I just want to, let folks know a few things today. I am giving away Chana Mason's book, Inner Voices. I was sharing that visual right here. She just put this out, Inner Voices, a guide freeing your mind. So whenever you comment on the show live, you're automatically entered to win, which is so wonderful. I also want to remind founders that, they're absolutely, we'd love to have you pop in questions and comments while we're going on in our conversation today and giving you some incredible gems. Also, I want you to take a moment to amplify your brand. You see, this show has an evergreen capability to it, which means, yes, we're live, but you never know who's going to be watching it later. Hundreds of views, sometimes thousands of views happen on each episode. So by amplifying your brand, that means you put in your business name, your one-liner, and your URL. I pop it up on the screen. Chana and I both go, yay, you go. And then you never know who's going to be watching and want to know more about you or connect with you on LinkedIn. So I just wanted to put that out there before we got started on our conversation today. And what I really, really love and appreciate about your story and origin story, Chana, is that we all know that the gateway to many of our challenges that we face as adults come from childhood trauma, whatever that looks like, right? And so please share with how your childhood trauma ended up informing your adult self and how these beliefs were just like stopping you in your tracks.
So, so having to flee from Colombia for me was particularly challenging because I was only 5 years old. And one of the things I did as a 5-year-old is create an entire narrative to try to give meaning to my circumstance. Now, we don't just do that when we're 5, we also do that when we're 55. The thing is that 5-year-olds happen to be just as qualified at creating logical stories as they are at drawing pictures and doing karate and cooking.
Yeah.
In other words, they're really bad at it. And we're really, really okay with saying, oh, a 5-year-old isn't particularly coordinated and they're kind of trying to do karate, or they're kind of trying to do ballet, or they're kind of trying to draw. And we say, oh, good job. That's so cute. But we all know they really suck at it, to be honest, right?
Yeah.
And they know they suck at it. And part of what we all do as human beings is we keep working on skills until we get better and better and better, so that by the time we're an adult, we can actually cook a real meal, and we can actually write a letter that is legible, and we can, draw a picture that actually looks like something. And that's totally acceptable. Except for some reason in this one area of our lives, which is in the area of building narratives and stories and beliefs, we treat the beliefs that are 5-year-old self-created as though it's what we say in Hebrew, Torah Sinai, as though it's like literally God's Bible that came down from the heavens on Mount Sinai, right?
And that's the memo we got to live our life by.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, so these are the laws of the world, right? So these were the laws that I created as a 5-year-old. The world is not a safe place. People are out to get me. I'm bound to be kidnapped, which eventually also was, I'm bound to be raped. Wow. I can't trust my parents to take care of me. I can't trust myself to take care of myself. And then immediately after we moved to the States, I started having nightmares. I had nightmares for years, like literally all night long. The minute I closed my eyes.
So going to sleep was just not a good thing.
I hated going to sleep. And one of the things that was particularly difficult is I heard people saying like, oh, well, you can, put on a cape and pretend that you can fly, and then you can go away from the bad guys. But when I would try to do that, I couldn't. Or I picture the Care Bears. I loved Care Bears as a little girl. I was obsessed with Care Bears. So Care Bears would come in to try to save the day, and then the witch would come and eat the Care Bears.
Oh, great.
Right, exactly. So another story I came up with is that I have no control over my mind.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the only thing as human beings we do actually have some sense of control is over our thinking. Yeah. But at the time, I just didn't have skills and tools for managing that. So everything became scary, and I'm very visual. So I pictured the worst case scenario in every life situation manifesting itself before my eyes. Like if I tripped on the sidewalk, I'd picture myself falling and my brain scattering all over this gorgeous, gory, like horrific.
No, I'm only laughing because I'm like right there with you. My husband's always going, what? Why do you take it that far? It's just that I see it and then I end up feeling it. And anybody I think who's empathic can also create that movie generated cinematographic moment, right?
Oh, right. It's like if only Hollywood could like go into our heads, they could just suck it all out and make millions, right? Like just out of what we could concoct. And it's like right now, it's like a pleasure to hear you reflecting that back for me on the one hand. And on the other hand, I'm like sad that you had to go through that also. But at the time, I thought I was the only person in the world who went through this. I was so lonely and didn't talk about it. And it was just horrific. So just the core, there were so many core things. Like I wasn't safe, and I wasn't even safe within myself. Like even my mind wasn't a safe place.
Right.
And that stayed with me for decades.
I'm sure it did. And so there you are as an adult. And did you go to college, and then did you work for a corporation while managing all of these?
Did I go to college? I pulled off the ultimate overachiever. I managed to go to an Ivy League school because I figured, if I could hustle hard enough that I could eventually run away from these demons. And I have a feeling that's like a similar resonant story for you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it was just like, if I could hustle enough and I could just keeping myself as busy as possible and run and go, maybe it'll be enough. And maybe I can overcome all of this stuff.
Right.
But actually, while I was at Dartmouth, I had this depressing experience of being in depression and being full of anxiety and being so overwhelmed by a life that, college life is actually pretty easy. But at the time it felt crazy.
Yeah.
And I went to this college therapist at the college clinic for an entire year. And at the end of that year, after every single week, basically divulging all of my stresses and all of my traumas and all of my stuff, and him trying to analyze me and put me in a box and look for who he could blame for why I was such a mess, and why is it my mom's fault, and why is it my dad's fault, and why is it this fault, and why is it that fault. And it felt like I was spilling out a can of worms. And then at the end of the hour, the bell would ring and I'd collect the worms into my arms and kind of somehow scramble out of that office. And by the end of that year, I looked at this guy and I said to him, this has not helped me at all. And that was one of many therapists. That was my experience. And it was just really, really pretty depressing. And it wasn't until I started meeting people of two different ilks. One, people who talked about us being able to have conscious control over our thinking, very focused on present. What do we do in the present moment and how do we move forward, as opposed to how do we analyze the past, which is just not particularly relevant. Like when I work with people, I don't really care where that thought came from or whose fault it is. It's just not relevant. It's just like, let's work with it here and now. And the other thing was people who have a spiritual consciousness. So I'm deeply, just innately, since I was very young, a deeply spiritual person. And I was seeking some massive higher purpose and meaning to life, and being treated by people who think that human beings are a machine just didn't resonate.
Yeah, and you brought up a couple really good points. One is, it's so easy during the day, folks, to distract yourself with, hustling and doing this and doing that. And for me personally, that was a great way of distraction, so that my anxiety always showed up in sleep. So, I would get there and I'd maybe fall asleep for a few hours, and then I'd wake up and every horrible thought you could possibly man. And, and the thing is that as you start delving into yourself and you're pulling back all these layers, you're finding even more. You got to get the shovel out to work on that. But also the other thing that you brought up too was that, yes, the past has informed why this has happened, but going back and quote, dealing with that is not necessarily anything other than stirring it all up and making it just right there in your face again. And how does that really help you at the end of the day? Talk a little bit about that, because, listen, I love therapy for sure. But like you, I always wondered, why didn't that therapist, 3 decades ago, notice that? Why did it take this person to show up and go, this is, and that's why? And it's like, wow. So talk a little bit about how sometimes going into the past and the trauma is not what it's about. It's how do you handle what's going on today with your brain and mind?
I think it really depends on the stance of the therapist. I interviewed a woman who lives here in Jerusalem. Her name is Lyons. She was a PhD from Columbia University, really top psychologist, and happened to, a few decades ago, go to like a health retreat place for a week. And they had all these different services that they offered. And one of them was to meet with a coach. And she's like, what's a coach? Back then, nobody knew what a coach was. And she met with this coach and was so blown away by him and his way of working with people that she literally just stopped working in psychotherapy, trained under him, and became a coach, and now runs the Jerusalem Coaching School.
Wow.
And I asked her, in her perception, what's the difference between these two modalities? And she reflected back to me exactly what my gut had experienced, which is that she felt like the psychological model was very top down. Like, I'm here to fix you. You're broken and I'm whole and I'm here to fix you. And the coaching model is, I'm here as someone who happens to have some tools that might be able to be of service to you, but we're going to meet as peers. And so I have no problem interacting with my clients on a personal level. They can come to my home. We can run into each other in the street and hug. It's like, we're real people.
Right.
So just that stance is one thing. And the other thing is, when I do work with people going into the past, it's always to say, how did you choose? What beliefs, what stories did you choose to create in this moment? And how can we shift those beliefs so that the past doesn't need to come revisiting you? It neutralizes that whole experience and enriches now your future. So for me, all of those negative beliefs that come into our lives, people have a tendency to want to do two things with those beliefs.
Yeah.
Either totally run away from them because it's really uncomfortable, but if they want to do something helpful, they'll want to just ignore the thoughts, like in meditation where you watch the thoughts go. And there's a purpose to that in meditation as a way to train your mind. And so it's like you either want to ignore it or you want to like shove it under the rug or meditate it away. Whereas for me, I see every thought that comes my way as divinely inspired as this conversation is. Like I see the divine having put the two of us together. I see the divine having put me in every circumstance of life, having put those armed guys who came into my house and threatened to kidnap my sisters and me. Like God put that there, just like God put us there, but the thoughts also. And if that thought is divinely inspired, then there must be some light inside of it. And if I can grasp that light, then it actually makes my life better.
That's right. It really does. And it shifts your belief around life happening to you versus for you, and which really can help you manage and actually find more joy in the circumstances. What I take away too from the beginning there, and you started to really dive in, and you were able to say to that therapist, like, okay, that was a year of what? And I did not get anything from that. But it also compelled you to solve this problem. Many people numb out, understandably. Many people just in food, sex, drugs, whatever, substance abuse, they will numb out. TV, binge watching, instead of wanting to take a look, because that can be so hard. But you were like, nope, I am going to solve this problem, which, by the way, is one of the core ingredients of many founders, is that they love that problem solving. They love pulling on that thread and keep going, well, why? I'm curious. Tell me more. And so you started to explore. So take us on that journey. You said, I don't want to be hanging out with all this pain and suffering. There's got to be a better way. What did you learn? How did you start pulling on threads?
So my last year of university, I did actually binge every single day. I had a pint of Ben and Jerry's. I was in New Hampshire, so it was kind of apropos. I had a pint of Ben and Jerry's every single day, and I got myself to a point that was just so miserable that something needed to shift.
Yeah.
And I got exposed to this material of, our thoughts can create our reality and we can do something about those thoughts. But somehow it just I wasn't ready for it. It didn't have the right tools. And then I got exposed to, I have no idea how, a man named Barry Neal Kaufman. I might have picked up one of his books at a used bookstore or something like that.
What's his name?
Barry Neal Kaufman. He created, together with his wife, a center in Massachusetts, in what's it called in Western Mass with a forest?
The Berkshires. Yeah.
Berkshires, thank you. The Option Institute. So he and his wife.
How did I miss this?
Oh, like brilliant stuff. Brilliant. So he and his wife had, he was like in a deep depression. His life was pretty miserable, went to therapy and it didn't go anywhere. And he learned this concept of what he calls to love is to be happy with. Which is very, very similar to Byron Katie saying loving what is.
Yeah.
It's the same truth. It's like, can you receive life as it is? And they had this whole process of asking questions, of engaging in Socratic inquiry, which basically means asking questions, really questioning your thinking so that you get to a point of acceptance and really understanding your motivations and where you're coming from. And the real, where, the pedal hit the metal was when they had a son who became autistic. And this was in the early 80s, I believe, maybe late 70s, but I think early 80s. And back then, most autistic kids were just institutionalized. And that felt pretty revolting to them. It didn't sit with them because they were so in tune with themselves. They weren't comfortable doing something that didn't sit with them. And they noticed that most of what was being done with autistic kids is like if a kid was rocking back and forth, they would pin the kid down. Or if the kid was making noises, they would, strap the kid in some way so he couldn't make noise.
Oh,
Everything was
horrific.
about stopping the kid doing what the kid wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Their whole mentality was, why don't we just accept that this is what the kid wants to do, and let's receive the child as he is.
Oh,
So I know, it's like
I mean,
amazing.
that's just so freeing, everyone, right? I mean,
So
and this is, we're constantly fed images of how it's supposed to look every single
and
day.
how we're wrong and we keep being wrong. And all of Madison Avenue is all about how you're not okay the way you are. You're supposed to be this way. And so
And let's fix that about your external self right away.
when their son was rocking back and forth, they rocked back and forth.
Yeah.
When their son made noises, they made noises. And they noticed that highly stimulating environments were a lot for him. So they took a bathroom in their house that happened to be all white. It was like all white tile and all white paint.
Mm-hmm.
They removed everything out of that bathroom. And one of the two of them, and then eventually they trained someone else, would be in that bathroom with their son 8 hours a day.
Wow.
And whatever he did, they did. And they put him in a low stress environment so that he wouldn't be as overwhelmed and as likely to engage in some of this behavior. And they were hoping to perhaps build a bridge. So they would, when it was time for him to eat, they would hold a spoon right next to their eyes, so that in order for him to eat, he had to make eye contact.
What?
And
Wow.
slowly they started building connection and getting him to find a way out of the cage that he'd created for himself to create safety. And he slowly started building skills out of this cage. And then they started training other parents. And eventually they created the Option Institute, which has a whole center for autism, but also has a center for people like us who just want to be happier and learn all of these different skills. And the CEO of the Option Institute is this boy.
Wait a minute. Seriously? I mean, sorry, I have to go cry now.
Went to college and you name it. Yeah.
Well, speaking of neurodiverse, let me just say hello to the wonderful Brent Manuel from Ottawa, Canada. He's a disability advocate here. And so he understands, and this story is just so amazing. As he says right here, this story is amazing. And Jeanette, mama of 5 children, 4 girls, and the founder of the Bo Hub, go check them out. Yeah, this is amazing. It is freeing when you can accept what is. And I'm telling you, most people, I mean, I talked in the beginning, up your founder game. As you do better, your business does better. These are skill sets, folks. It's a mindset hacks that will help you do better at function, getting your business where it needs to go. But at the end of the day, there's so much joy in not trying to achieve something that's out of your realm. And this is something else, Chana, that I bring up all the time, which is knowing what success looks like for you. And so while everything is drummed in, the VCs are all, venture capitalists are all looking for unicorns, unicorn this, millions that. You can be happy as a founder at 100,000 a year, $500,000 a year, feeding your family, maybe changing the generational wealth of your family. You can be happy maybe employing a few people, like this pressure to do a business that's going to scale. If that's your calling, hooray. But I'm going to come back to today, that young man who rocked a lot and had things to say and was overstimulated by the environment. They created a bridge. They watched him and said, what do you need? Instead of, this is what we need from you.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the CEO now.
Amazing.
And this is where a lot of people too run into problem, which is that bigotry is about setting low expectations for people too. And so here's a group of folks who are neurodiverse. They're not showing up the way we want them to in order to do what we think they need. Best story.
So as I'm reading, I just was like devouring his books. So the book where he really goes into detail, this whole story about his relationship with his son, is called Sunrise. But S-O-N. And he also created this process called the option process that they train people in at the Option Institute. That's all about asking questions like, why do you believe that? Or do you need to be angry in order to start, to, I don't know, save the world, whatever it is.
Right.
Or Is it true? You know, those kinds of questions. And it's a pretty complicated process to learn, to be honest. I
Yeah.
use it a lot in my therapeutic practice, but I struggle to teach it because it takes a long time to learn. It's got a manual, it's about this big, and I've read the manual multiple times. And so there I am in the middle of reading this manual, and I get a knock on the door. It's my friend Noga, who lives 3 doors down from me. I live in this like very quaint neighborhood with like lots of old Jerusalem stone and alleyways. And so, you know, this story is going to have a lot of neighbors who are literally all within a minute walk from my house. So she knocks on my door and she says, "You've got to read this book." And this book that she had in her hand was Byron Katie's Loving What Is. And I read the book and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I have another girlfriend who's really into personal growth. And I hand it to her. I was like, you've got to read this book. This is the answer. This is what we've been looking for. She reads it and she's blown away and hands it to another friend. This goes around the neighborhood, about 10 of us. We're all blown away by this book. And we decided to gather together. And this is like the miracle of my life, kid you not, was just this gathering. We gathered together every single week and worked this material for years.
What?
I
mean,
know.
Byron came out with it. I want to say, was it like 2015? When did the work come?
No,
Loving What Is.
Way before that. Because
wow,
we were doing this in something like 2010, 29.
Oh, no kidding. I was late to the party.
Yeah. And
folks, it's Byron Katie, Byron Katie. The book is Loving What Is, also known as The Work. And there's just 4 foundational questions, a little bit up there with Don Manuel Luis with his 4 agreements, just a very simple approach, but profound for shifting your life. So you got together with these 4 women.
We got together and there we all are with a million skeletons in each of our closets and so scared of our thoughts and so scared of our beliefs and so ashamed of who we are. Yeah. And nobody else has my belief. I'm the only one walking around with it. And it's so stressful. But slowly over time, one woman starts saying, I'm really struggling with having sex with my husband and I have these beliefs about it. And half the room is like, oh yeah, me too. And one day I came in and we're all observant Jewish women. And so prayer is a core part of our Jewish practice, but I was really struggling with prayer. And so I came in with this belief that I wasn't praying every day. And I had this belief that I should be praying. And of course, most of the room is like, oh yeah, me too. And I was like, really? I was so scared to even say it out loud. And then it turned out everyone's got the same thing. And you do that enough and you really come to see, first of all, how universal so many of our thoughts are and how there's really nothing to be ashamed of. But the other thing is that my thoughts aren't mine. They're just thoughts that happen to be passing by. Like I like to sort of see each human being as like a harbor. And, this boat has come and is like, is it going to park in your harbor or not? And if it parks in your harbor, it's because it has something to teach you. And if it just keeps going, it's because you don't have a lesson there. And the lesson is always embedded in what Byron Katie calls turnarounds, in the opposite of the thought. Yeah. And I think one of the most revolutionary points in my life was when I decided, or when I acknowledged that I chose every single belief that I've espoused. Yeah. As soon as I acknowledged that, everything changed. Because for a long time, I told myself that I believed I was unlovable. That was a big one I carried around because other people told me X, Y, and Z, meaning that it was somebody else's thought that they shoved down at me. So I was like a victim of other people's words or a victim of other people's beliefs or a victim of other people's propaganda. But I wasn't willing to own up to the fact that I chose to believe it. And if I choose to believe that because I'm a woman, I can't do math, or because I'm from Latin America, I'll never be good at English, then I'm just going to live that way. But I don't have to believe that. Or because I had trauma as a child, I'll never be able to have healthy relationships. Or because you had your experiences, we can listen to that. But at the end of the day, we choose everything that we believe. And once you recognize that, then that means you can choose something else instead.
And that is the freeing power of it all. Oh my gosh. We've almost been like a whole hour going through this processing, but this is what helps people break through and dissolve those mental chokeholds that are going to keep you from fulfilling your joy, your full expression in life. And I'm saying this, directly to you viewers and replay viewers and podcast listeners. It's why entrepreneurship is the best personal development and professional development program out there, why you never lose when you launch a business, because you have to start exploring things about yourself. The day can be distracting, but your business will get held up by these thoughts that are going to hold you back from, and they are, as Chana just said, they're not truth. Okay. They're beliefs that you're telling yourself in stories. And there are action steps that you can take to give those historical voices, inner voices that have been with you, I'm sure, for many years, no matter how old you are, give them life. And they need to get blended in or sent off to the corner store with $100 bill. Which is so good. We have covered so much territory on this conversation. Let's talk a little bit about, inner voices, because, you have your other book, which I love, Hold That Thought. And again, it's tools to manage the thoughts. But tell us a little bit more about inner voices, because we're very familiar with our inner voices as founders.
So when I wrote Hold That Thought, I wrote it because other coaches and therapists were coming to me asking me for advice on how to use tools for inquiry in a therapeutic practice. And there's certain places when you're it's one thing when you're doing it on your own and you're reading Byron Katie's book or you're reading about the option process and you just kind of finagle your way through and you're fine. But if you're in a therapeutic process, you really want to make sure you're really solid in those skills.
Yeah.
And there are certain places like Byron Katie has this question number 4, how are you without the thought? And I noticed a lot of people just couldn't answer that question. And that's how I created this whole thing of like, oh, it's a tool I call the little green troll. Get that thought to leave you and manifest itself as a creature. And then you see it leaving the room by creating a bribe. And it's like a really cute game. And that's a tool that I created to help facilitate inquiry. Yeah. So Hold That Thought is full of those. And I ended up getting rid of the language that says this is for coaches and therapists because lay people can read it too and totally use the tools.
Yep.
And at the same time, I wanted to give people a book that really helps them use tools for inquiry. It's simply in a journal on their own. And the way I did it is by showing some of my own journal entries and also how I work other people through the process of inquiry. And I introduce other tools also, like the one question that I shared with you and really like specifically, how do you do this in a journal? And I literally like show my journal, which is a little embarrassing, but there it is. And, my goal is that people use these tools. My recommendation for anyone who reads these books is to read it with a partner and practice it a lot. Like I practiced it for years with a whole bunch of my friends. And that's really how I got really good at it. Yeah. So there's that. And then I also offer courses that are live where people can practice these tools and go really, really deep. I actually have one coming up in May. It's called Slay Your Dragons.
Excellent. And that's all online and folks can go at their own pace, or do they show up at a specific time for this?
So the live course, Slay Your Dragons, is, it's a live course. Everyone's together at the same time and you get a buddy. So during the week, you have exercises to do on your own, also with your buddy, and you're practicing throughout the week. And I'm coaching people live in the session as well. So people really have a chance to go deep and then also build like a really sweet community of people who are there to facilitate them whenever they need.
Oh, that's wonderful, folks. When you're doing this kind of profound work, and again, you're a founder, you're managing a lot. You're thinking like, how am I going to add one more thing to my plate? But you got to slay these dragons that go on in your head. And the best thing is when you are matched up with a buddy, because there's a little bit of accountability that happens through that so that you show up better, but it's also like a mini process, say, that you can go through with each other instead of the whole crowd. That one-on-one buddy system is great. And what I really appreciate about Inner Voices, Hannah, is that, what we just went through with me is that, identifying the thoughts that stress you and tune into those signals in the body and then start to dissolve, or as you say, shatter the limitations. These are limiting beliefs that will hold you back. And it could be your belief about a certain type of person. So you've got that person on your team and they're really delivering, but you might have a belief around them. But even more importantly, and this is something I'm always working on, and I will probably until my last breath, which is the compassionate and supportive mindset, how we talk to each other every day. I'm sure founders, you're just at home going, oh, you did a great job today. I just love how you showed up and look how well you handled that. Even though it went to hell in a handbasket, you were amazing. You're doing that, right?
Not always.
I'm thinking that's a big no. And Richard, you had a great thought. Perhaps thoughts are choice points. I don't know what choice points are, but I think that's a little bit what you were saying, Hannah.
Yes,
Is that
you're really we curate our world of thought,
right?
and we can curate it more effectively to bring more joy into our lives.
That's right. And one thing also that I'm taking away from this conversation is that, folks, you're not locked into who your thoughts tell you to be.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk just a little bit about that? So, some people just say, nope, that's just how I was raised.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. People are like, oh, this is just who I am. And it's like, no, this is who you've habituated yourself to be.
That's right.
And this is how you raised yourself, because we've seen every single one of us in our personal lives, but we have also seen in, the world of fame and fortune, that two people can grow up in the exact same environment with the exact same parents and the exact same situation and make totally different life choices.
Yeah.
Tony Robbins has this story about these two guys who grew up with an abusive alcoholic father.
Mm-hmm.
One of them became this like multimillionaire, super successful, rich relationships guy. And people asked him, like, how did you turn out this way? And he said, with a dad like mine, I had no choice.
Right.
And this other guy ends up becoming this abusive alcoholic who's like totally doesn't have his life together. And people asked him, how did you end up this way? And he said, with a guy like mine, I had no choice. And a dad like mine, I had no choice. And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way, right? That we're choosing what we're believing, and we can choose to believe differently. And I know that in my own experience, I've totally revolutionized so many of my most intimate relationships through this work and through practicing it over and over again.
Right. And we had two guests on the show, prior shows. We had Quan Nguyen, who was incarcerated for second-degree murder. And we learned how he shifted while he was incarcerated, that he was able to get parole, and now how he serves entrepreneurs because he had an incredible, profound realization about the choice. And as well as Abraham from Pitch Gauge, how, incarcerated as a young man for 4 years, said he didn't want to be that guy. And he started making different choices, and he came out as living an amazing life. So, we don't have to get caught up in those stories that we keep telling ourselves. And I'm going to be so curious, founders, to hear what your thoughts are about our conversation today with this incredible coach, author, and speaker. Oh, Hannah, this has just been an incredible conversation. And you are right. This is why Byron calls it the work, folks. And I know that you're feeling many times emotionally depleted. You have so many plates spinning in the air. What can founders do? Because it's a lot of pressure to launch a business. And that's, again, that's just a thought too. It can be so much fun. It can be so exhilarating. But when folks are feeling depleted, Hannah, how can they shift their thoughts to feeling better about the not having it be a burden, but having it be a joyful journey in their founderhood?
So as soon as I hear, like, there's like certain words that I'm hearing you say, burden, heavy, stressful, pressure. So I automatically am thinking,
Hashtag the struggle is real.
Right. What are the thoughts that they're believing in that moment? Right. So if you're feeling this pressure in your chest, or you're feeling, like there are a million bricks on your shoulders, so just simply ask yourself the one question: what am I believing right now that's making me feel this way? And just having done this so many times, right away, I can tell you that they're believing I should do X, Y, and Z. I have to do X, Y, and Z. If I don't do X, Y, and Z, the world's going to end. My business is going to fall apart. I'm going to lose everything, something like that. And very often they're not making space for a conversation with the universe, with the collective consciousness, with the divine, whatever you want to call it. That if we're putting out the message that it's all up to me and I have to be go, 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 or else. So then the universe is like, oh, I guess you don't need me. Like sort of God, whatever you want to call it, is like, oh, well, there isn't space within your go, go, go schedule for providence to come in, for serendipity to come in, for pixie dust to make its way. I have a few clients who are in real estate, and I tell them all the time, I personally think their entire industry is just pure magic and pixie dust. Like, you work in real estate, you make a handful of deals over the course of a year, and that's where your entire income comes from. But you're touching dozens of deals and clients and this and that, but really it only comes from a handful. And how did you end up meeting those people? Like, it really is, it's not like working in a store where you get paid $10 an hour, and if you show up for 10 hours you get paid $100. If you show up for 5 hours you make $50. It doesn't work that way. It's really just magic and pixie dust. So if it's magic and pixie dust anyway, do you really have to work yourself like a slave, or can you create a consciousness in your mind that simply attracts the right people to you?
Right.
And that's true for really any entrepreneur. Most of the business encounters that you have bits of serendipity to them. So maybe focus more on creating more space for that and less on the hustle.
That's right. And we know that hustle culture does not work, and how your business unfolds. You can be a turtle on roller skates, and that is absolutely okay. It doesn't absolutely positively have to happen in a set period of time. And this is what I hear so often is, I've been at this for years. Yeah, 2 years, maybe 3. I mean, why hasn't anything clicked? And I said, well, where's the time schedule? And, it's the same thing with dreams. They don't have an expiration date either. Your business has its own soul journey. You got your soul journey on this road here. It's all good. Yes, Angela, we're looking forward to seeing you on the 25th. How you doing? She's saying the power of thoughts build your future. And that's when you're not letting them rule you, and you are allowing. And I think what you said about the magic and pixie dust, if you choose to frame up what you're doing as a joyful experience, it will be. And you will see that happening day in and day out as you start to reframe. And I bring up the other topics because I know, as I'm watching founders as they go through their day, it's not trying to get them to shift. That's why I like to bring my enthusiastic and deliciousness to folks' life.
I love the term "and delicious." I put it in my email out to my list. I was like, this is great.
And I just want you to say, this whole conversation has been, all for me, one of these. An Ande-licious moment. Thank you so much for joining me today and adding your brilliance. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick screen share here and bring in the giveaway tool, which is always so much fun. And we've had, sometimes it doesn't grab all the comments that we had today, but we will just go ahead and draw with these 5 entries and see what happens and see where it lands and who's going to be the winner. Richard O! Woo, 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 Richard. Oh my gosh. So here's the wonderful thing about Richard. I've known him since 2012, Richard. He has really helped me up my game as a podcast host and a live stream host, because he is a podcaster. He is someone who helps produce podcasts, and people just, he can make sure that your show runs smoothly. I'm so glad that you're winning this book, because this is your world, Richard, too. So there are no accidents in this situation here for sure. Thank you. You're going to win a copy of, hold on, let me just pull this image up right here. Inner Voices, a guide for freeing your mind. Yay, Richard. Thank you. One last question I love to ask every one of my guests who have launched a business, who you had to figure out what clients, who was your ideal client, who were you going to talk to, and whether it was divinely tuned into your vibe or you set out and set up a formal ClickFunnels. You have been at this for a while now. How has the entrepreneurship journey served you personally and professionally?
So entrepreneurship is something I was raised with. Both of my parents are entrepreneurs, and my husband is also an entrepreneur. So it's just like very much in our language. I love creating projects. I've created projects since I was in high school and love making things happen. For me, it's just been really cool to have total control over my time. Um,
Yes.
so for many years, we homeschooled.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a teenage son. He's a really incredible kid. He's 17. He now goes to like a proper high school. But for about 6 years, we homeschooled. And I wanted to be able to start doing something that really belonged to me outside of me being a homemaker.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I wanted it to be super homeschool friendly.
Yeah.
So coaching was something that I could do, meeting people over Zoom. And I also started giving tours here in Jerusalem. And he loved coming with me on my tours. So it worked out really, really well. I did culinary tours. And eventually the culinary tours, took a step back. And when my son went back to school, I revved up the energy in the coaching practice. And all along the way, I'd been writing books. So I have a number of books that people can check out in addition to these two. And I have some children's books that I've been working on forever. Hopefully one day I'll publish them. And those were things that I could do in my own time, sort of working around homeschooling. And now that I just totally have my time, I've really revved that up. And I love being able to try things and do different things. And last year, my family spent 3 months in South Africa, and I, to a certain degree, put my coaching practice on hold. And I was totally fine because
Yay.
I've got other sources of income. So for me, just having that flexibility is a really big deal, particularly as a woman and as a mom.
That's right. And, in your case too, your business serves you.
Yeah.
Which is so important. So many times people launch a business, next thing they know, they've got, they're handcuffed, okay? Whether it's their choice, which is usually what it is, because they haven't set up the boundaries. You can take weekends off. You can take time away. You just have to have great people running the show while you're not there, folks. And so I love that. And for me too, I was a reluctant entrepreneur and raising children, especially after what my husband and I had gone through to have our two successful outcomes. It was my North Star. How can I be present as a mom, but also fulfill my need to, launch businesses? So it's just great. I loved hearing that. I love celebrating you. And I really think your work is so important for all walks of life, but especially founders who are really confronted with some thoughts about themselves that will not serve them in their business. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to pop you into the green room, so to speak, and I'll catch up with you after I hit end broadcast. Okay, so don't go away.
Thanks. Take care. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, thank you for joining us. Wow. And I got to be on, quote, the hot seat, everybody, right? So it was really fun to be able to take a little deep dive into my own process with you and how I keep practicing to show up fully and authentically and love myself. And I'm going to read you that Wayne Dyer quote because I have it right here, which is, "You are always a valuable, worthwhile human being, not because anybody says so, not because you're successful, not because you make a lot of money, but because you decide to believe it and for no other reason." Now, that's a great thought to end on for today. Let me share with you who is joining us next on the Startup Life Live show. Phenomenal woman who really stepped out of her comfort zone to make things happen. And it's Jennifer Mendoza. And she's the founder and GP, general partner of Mendoza Ventures. And she's Latinx founder and she's a funder, which we just love to see. That representation is so important because as we change who writes the checks, we change who gets the checks. All right. And she's going to share how she went from an interior design architect to managing a huge fund that invests in pre-seed tech startups, primarily in fintech and AI, and how she's addressing the funding gap on who it goes to. So it's going to be a great conversation. Bring all your questions for funding, and we will see you on Friday, March 18th for that delicious conversation. And of course, how do you know when I'm having a new guest? You join the Startup Life Live Meetup group. And you can scan that QR code. Links are in the show notes, whether you're listening to the podcast or a replay version. How to join that group is right there visually or in the show notes. Until next time, I am wishing you all a delicious day everywhere you glow, and just let those thoughts go right on by. We learned some great tips for managing that today. Thank you for tuning in, and I think this is it. See you next time.